Shabbat Shalom. On January 1st, the first day of my 2-month sabbatical, I got into my Subaru Outback. Liam, my youngest son, was in the passenger seat. We were ready to start our cross-country drive back to his last college semester in Boston. Outside, it was cold and it was snowy, wind whipping the car on the highway, but we were all smiles inside. The warmth came from the openness of the road, the joy in our hearts, precious time together. We talked about what we would listen to along the way. It could have been music, singing at the top of our lungs, inspiring and imaginative literature, or funny comedy routines. We chose instead to listen to a couple books by George Orwell. First Animal Farm, then 1984. What were we thinking? Oh, the outside cold seemed to come through the windows as we listened to the prescient words that I hadn't heard since I read them in 1984 in high school. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command, Orwell writes. Wow. Sure, it was kind of a downer way to begin my sabbatical, but also a beautiful shared experience between father and son that we'll never, ever forget. We fully felt the light of that time we shared and managed to do so without ignoring the darkness around us. Every day we make choices about how much to focus on what is happening in our world, most of which is beyond our control, and how much to focus on what we can do in our own communities or with the people around us. And whenever we look to the Torah, we find both the dark reality of the world as it is and the inspiring light of the way we wish it to be. As we read this week's Parshiot by Akel Pikudei, the Israelites who were despondent from last week's golden calf catastrophe are in barn-raising mode with passionate zrizut, an alacrity, a cheerful aliveness. They are building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, with everything they've got, finding their way back to the light, to God. They bring gifts of the heart, materials for building, until the artist, the master contractor, Bezalel, says to Moses, "We have more than enough." And Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda, did all that God commanded Moshe. So the children of Israel had done all the work. Moses saw all the work, and behold, they had done it. As God had commanded, so they had done. There they were. In the arid and barren landscape of the wilderness of Mount Sinai, they created a literal sanctuary. When Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and kavod Adonai maleh et hamishkan, the presence of God, filled the tabernacle. This portion ends not with a whimper, but with a bang. Once the Mishkan is complete, as soon as that last piece is attached, it whirs to life, it beats, it breathes. The community that had been torn apart by the golden calf, is now convoked into the only way to be resilient in the wilderness, facing any darkness, by focusing on community, by bringing their best selves, their light, their zrizut, toward care for each other. That day, by the way, was the first day of the first month of the second year, meaning it was almost exactly a year since they had left Egypt. And being the first day of the month, in the nighttime sky, it was complete darkness. For the moon cannot be seen on the first day of the month, or perhaps just a sliver of light at its edge. Tonight, this Shabbat is a special one, called Shabbat HaChodesh, preparing us for Pesach, for Passover. It is called Shabbat HaChodesh because that same time, the first day of the first month, is going to happen next week. He brings us toward a new beginning. Chodesh, the Hebrew word for month, is connected to chadash, new, and chidush, renewal. In effect, the moon is the messenger of change and renewal, the ability to emerge from total darkness to a state of fullness, totality, the perfection that awaits us on the 14th of Nisan when Passover begins. The new month reminds me of a story I read from Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld, the president of Hebrew College, the person who ordained Rabbi Heather Renetsky. And with this story, I'll conclude. She wrote, "When I was growing up, there were two photographs that hung side by side on the wall of our dining room. One was a vast field of white snow. Against the backdrop of that barren expanse in the bottom left corner of the photograph, one could make out the small, dark figures of a family huddled together for warmth. The other photo was of an empty city street at night. And against the black-gray backdrop of the desolate urban landscape, in the top left corner of that photograph blinked the flickering light of an old neon sign. Notice, my mother would remind me, how in the face of overwhelming cold, your eye is drawn to the place of warmth and human connection. Notice how in the face of overwhelming darkness, your eye is drawn to the point of light." I've been thinking about my mother's reminder. Let your eye be drawn to the places of warmth, light, human connection. This is both a natural impulse she wanted me to understand, but it is also a choice. And in this moment, at this moment, that choice is an act of political and spiritual resistance. On this Shabbat HaChodesh, as we complete the book of Exodus, as we celebrate with our ancestors the filling of the Mishkan with God's light, may we seek and find that light as we travel on whatever open roads are before us, and hold on to it with everything we've got. Amen.